Welcome, everyone. We're excited to see you today. I'm Tanya Stevenson. I'm the CEO of the Myotonic Dystrophy Foundation. We're delighted to welcome you to our state advocacy training today, February 11th, during Rare Disease Month. Just a little bit about the Myotonic Dystrophy Foundation. We envision a world with treatments and a cure for myotonic dystrophy. Our mission is community, care, and a cure. We support and connect the myotonic dystrophy community. We provide resources and advocate for care, and we accelerate research towards treatments and a cure. Next slide. Just a little about the resources and support from MDF. Our toolkits and publications, including clinical care recommendations, can be found at myotonic.org/toolkits-publications. We have a lot of different types of support and support groups. You can find our support programming at myotonic.org/find-support. Our calendar of events at myotonic.org/calendar/month. And our digital academy, which includes all of the presentations from past webinars, including past conferences and presentations at myotonic.org/digital-academy. And as a reminder, today's presentation is being recorded and will be added to the Digital Academy within the next week or so. We would love to remind you, if you haven't already, to please register for the 2025 MDF International Conference. Registration is open for both community members and for our myotonic dystrophy professionals. We want you to be sure to check out the discounted hotel block that is still available, detailed community session listing that is available on the website, and we have new Sunday morning workshops that we'll be offering for the first time this year. You can go to myotonic.org/conference to learn more, and we do hope to see you in Indianapolis, May 2nd through 4th. Next slide, thank you. So in this advocacy webinar today, we're going to cover a few things. One, we're going to look at MDF research advocacy activities, our state advocacy captain volunteer responsibilities, the 2025 advocacy plan of action, and some best practices from MDF volunteer leaders who will be joining us a little bit later. Next slide. If you have questions, thank you for those who have submitted in advance. We appreciate it. Kevin's going to do his best to actually address those questions in the presentation. So he's designed that with those questions that were submitted previously. But if you have questions during the presentation, please go into the Q&A button to open the window, type your question into the text field, and you can choose to send anonymously, or you can have your name associated with your question. It's completely up to you, but type your question in, hit send, and it will get to us. We will be holding questions until the very end of the presentation, but at any time you are welcome to submit your question while the presentation is happening. All right, it is my great pleasure to introduce Mr. Kevin Brennan from Bluebird Strategies. He has served as MDF's advocacy consultant since 2015. Working with the DM community, he has helped MDF increase federal funding for myotonic dystrophy research by $24 million over the past several years through congressional designation of myotonic dystrophy as an eligible condition under the Department of Defense peer-reviewed medical research program. Prior to his work with the foundation, Kevin served for over a decade as a senior staff person in the US House of Representatives. He led the Arthritis Foundation's Public Policy and Advocacy Office for 8 years and is co-chair of the foundation's National Advocacy Committee. He has also worked in the private sector for the life sciences company Amgen. At age 15, he was diagnosed with psoriatic arthritis, another rare disease. He lives in Washington, D.C. with his wife and 3 children. Welcome, Kevin. Take it away.
Thank you, Tanya, very, very much. It is nice to be with you all this evening. It has obviously been a momentous couple of weeks here in Washington. And I think it's a perfect opportunity for us to talk tonight about the evolution of our grassroots advocacy efforts to, create more awareness around myotonic dystrophy and empower our community to take steps to seek more federal research dollars to support the work that we're doing. So we're going to walk through tonight some of the topics that Tanya talked about. So what are we trying to accomplish? So this year, we have 4 top-level advocacy objectives. One is to raise awareness of myotonic dystrophy at every level. So that's the White House, at the agency level, at Congress, at the state level, and even at the community level. In doing awareness serves a larger purpose, and that is, number one, we are seeking a dedicated $10 million that is only focused on myotonic dystrophy research that is part of the congressionally directed medical research program. For those of you that have been involved in this effort last year, you'll know that we made an effort to get it last year. This is the second year we're working towards this goal. Oftentimes, with advocacy work with legislators, it can take 1 to 2 to 3 years to succeed in these efforts. And this is our second year doing that. So we're going to talk a little bit about, what we're trying to accomplish there. And then we want to continue the streak of success that we have had in staying eligible for the PRMRP program, the peer-reviewed medical research program. And if we're included in the bill this year, it would be the 9th year in a row. And that's the program that has driven the resources that Tanya mentioned in my introduction. And while I take great pride in that work, that has been the help of lots of individuals, and you're going to hear from some of them tonight, who really played a key role in getting that program launched and sustaining that funding. And what that does is it opens the door to myotonic dystrophy researchers to apply for funding under that program, and it's new dollars that are on top of the money we get through the National Institutes of Health. And then lastly, we continue at the state, local, and even international level to promote International Myotonic Dystrophy Awareness Day. And folks can take, simple proclamations, talk to their governor, talk to the head of their city council, talk to folks in executive positions and ask them to promulgate these proclamations. It costs nothing. Most folks, in these positions are eager to do it. And it can be a lot of fun to organize your community around it and then have some kind of an event, as the signing is done or as the proclamation is being released. And it's a great way to build community and to build awareness and support for our efforts. So as I talked about it, in order to get these funds that we're seeking for CDMRP for the $10 million and for our 9th year of eligibility for PRMRP, Congress needs to hear from us. They need to understand that this is a serious genetic disorder. They need to understand that it is so serious and how it impacts people's day-to-day lives, and that it is worthy of scarce federal support and funding. We are not directly competing with other diseases and causes, but in a way we are. Congress every day is hearing from folks in the healthcare space or any other space who feel that their cause, is worthy of federal research support. And so it's really important that we, mobilize every person in our community who is able to make that case. And so, the State Advocacy Captain volunteer initiative is really trying to build on that idea so that we can have an infrastructure of volunteers around the country who are developing these relationships with members of Congress and helping to carry that word forth. So we've tried to keep this as simple as possible. And some of this can be as much as or as little as you want. But some of the basic responsibilities would be, if you're interested in doing this after we're finished the webinar, is you would be the main point of contact for your state. And that means that as we move forward in our efforts to build support for the 2 requests, the CDMRP and the PRMRP, there's going to be email campaigns to Congress. It's, your job would be to ask, the folks in our community, in your state, maybe there's a support group meeting that you could reach out to those folks. Maybe you have neighbors, friends, others, but to try to grow the number of folks that go to myotonic.org and utilize the website and communicate to Congress that this is important. And then, gather that information as you're getting it and share that with me and the National Advocacy Committee so that we can get a sense of what is happening, within your state and how it's impacting members of Congress. So that's really important. The other piece as we move into the appropriations process is going to be to organize either in person or more likely virtual meetings with the staff or the members of the Senate and House that are in your state delegation. And we're going to provide you with all the information and information that you need for this, but it would be to do that too. And then throughout the year, we'll have periodic webinars like this or more informal opportunities to share best practices to continue to build your knowledge, your confidence, your expertise in being our lead advocacy captains. And I would add that, a lot of what we're talking about are best practices that we've seen other organizations use. So this is a pretty tried and true model that we're building out here. So as I mentioned, we're really, focused. Last year, we added a really cool feature to myotonic.org, and it is our action alert section. And so you can see this is a slide that shows you what appears when I go on the site. Last year, we have, and this is what we'll do this year. We had House and Senate letters. The House letter was organized by Congresswoman Kiggins from Virginia, who's a Republican, and Congressman Moskowitz from Florida, who's a Democrat. And they circulated a letter amongst all of their House colleagues saying, we want $10 million for myotonic dystrophy research. So that action alert went out to the community, and we asked everybody to go on the website, utilize the letter that was loaded into the website. And then when you go there, you can personalize the letter, which we encourage. You will then find that it will go to your 2 senators and to your House person. It's really easy to use. You don't have to look up your member of Congress if you don't know it. You don't have to figure any of those things out. It's all on the site. So it's really great. And on the other end of that, we can actually see how many letters are generated, how many emails are generated. So last year, for the 2 campaigns around this that we launched, we had about 1,100, 1,200 emails that went out through the site, which was tremendous. This year, some of you may have seen, we sent an action alert around when the NIH announced the pause in some of the grant funding that's been going on and some of the meetings, and there's been a great deal of confusion amongst a lot of the researchers that we work with who have been concerned that they've had grant review meetings coming up in February. They weren't sure if they were going to happen. And so we've been working with not just ourselves, but with a lot of our colleagues in the rare disease community and communicating to Congress that we really want to see this pause lifted. We want our researchers to be able to continue engage with NIH and get the grant money that they have earned and have been awarded so that they can continue to pursue research. I think as Tanya has said so well to me and others, we're about increasing funding for research, and we're about eliminating barriers to myotonic dystrophy research. I'm really excited. This campaign to date, and it's only been a few days now, has generated 1,300 emails to Congress. And we're starting to see some members respond positively about this and saying, hey, we hear you. We support NIH research. We want to see this happen. We want to work with you all to try to, correct this situation. So I think this is another great example of how the community is having a positive impact in our efforts to increase funding for research. So we're going to be posting letters for the CDMRP and PRMRP efforts again in a few weeks. And so this will be one of the responsibilities of the advocacy captains is to take advantage of this opportunity and generate as many responses as we can get. So then the next piece of this is to have you lead efforts to schedule meetings. So if you're from Ohio or Missouri or any state, you're going to have 2 senators and several House members. And so we're going to work with people and train folks to do their own meetings. It might be with the member of Congress or the senator, but more likely it's going to be with the staff person. So you'll see here that you have information about how to make a phone call to the Capitol Hill operator, ask to be connected with the senator or representative's office. There's a script here that talks about how then you say, My name is Jane Doe. I'm a volunteer advocate. You list your hometown. I'm calling to request a virtual meeting with the representative or senator or their healthcare staff to discuss, the bipartisan letter. In this case, this is a House script that Congresswoman Kiggins and Moskowitz are sending. This matter is time sensitive. I'd like to, have your kind attention. That's how you get the ball rolling and having them set up that meeting. And then we will work with you to really script that. But we're going to hear some volunteers talk about their experience and how they've set these meetings up and the experience they've had in communicating on behalf of the foundation. So what do you say in these meetings? So once the meeting is set up and you're ready to go, you might have a few volunteers with you on a Zoom call. You could do it just yourself. Many different ways to do it. You want to explain, who you are. I'm a volunteer. I'm a person living with myotonic dystrophy. I care for somebody, with myotonic dystrophy. And I'm here to talk to you about our efforts to get $10 million for CDMRP. Really important to briefly share your personal story. So again, they understand a little bit about the disease and the fact that we have no FDA cleared treatments yet, and that we need more research to continue to expand our knowledge that's going to improve, our treatment and options down the road. So I think the diagnostic odyssey is also important to highlight, but really, these staffers meet with, so many people in a given week. The story that you share, your personal journey or as a caregiver, will be the thing that's sticky in their minds. They will remember this. And then lastly, you want to ask them if they'll consider, asking that their boss co-sign that letter. These meetings don't result usually in a, yes, we'll do it. You'll get, in the best case scenario, this looks like something my boss would do. Let me go talk to them. It'll take me a week or two, and then we'll get an answer. What's important is that we follow up on these calls and conversations. So we send emails, we let folks know that this is important, and hold them accountable. So just a little bit of this slide's a little bit my bad for having this here, but this is a little bit of the background on the PRMRP program. As I mentioned, we've been there for a couple of years. It's resulted in $24 million in research. We've had some supporters, Senator Casey, who is no longer a member of the Senate, Senator Durbin, who is still here, and Senator Feinstein, who has passed away last year. Senator Feinstein really was our lead champion. She was really the one who got us our first designation. Martha's going to talk a little bit about the work that she helped lead in the California delegation that resulted in Senator Feinstein stepping up and being our champion. But we're always in the process of needing new champions to help build support. In this instance, it just takes one member of the Senate to include in their request to the Appropriations Committee our request for myotonic dystrophy research. So we're continuing to try to build, 1 plus as many as senators as we can get to support us. And again, for the CDMRP campaign, these are all very similar. We just talked about the meeting requests and making sure we get an answer. This is all really important. The meetings are important, the personal stories are important, and the follow-up is important. If you don't follow up, there's a real good chance that they won't follow up with you, and that request will just kind of sit there and collect dust. So the follow-up is really important so that they know that we're paying attention and that we're going to hold them accountable for that. So just a reminder, as Tanya mentioned, there's going to be an opportunity at the end of our webinar tonight to do questions. So just remember to click on the Q&A button to open the window, type your response to the question in the text field, and check the send anonymously checkbox if you do not want your name to be attached to your question in the Q&A, and then click send. And at the end of our conversation and the presentations that I'm about to open up, we'll have a chance to ask myself or Martha or Belinne or Lisa questions about their experience or anything that you need. So let me move now. We're going to have 3 really wonderful volunteer leaders in the organization who are going to share their story. I'm going to go in order of appearance. So Belinne Asparis, who is a clinician and an MDF board member and also a member of the National Advocacy Committee, previously was living in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and has now moved to Florida. So she's going to talk a little bit about some of her experience. Following her, we're going to have Martha Montag Brown, who is the Myotonic Dystrophy Foundation Vice Chair and also a member of the National Advocacy Committee and resides in California. And then Lisa Harvey-Duran, who is a founding executive director of the Myotonic Dystrophy Foundation and the mom of Kayla, who our National Advocacy Award is named after. And Lisa is going to wrap things up. Lisa is going to be leading our efforts in West Virginia, although previously has been living in California, but excited to have her help lead and develop relationships with that delegation. And so with that, I am going to hand off to Belen, who is going to share a little bit of her personal story.
Hello, good evening. Thank you for having me here. So as my name is Belen Esparis, and as Kevin said, I'm back in Florida, but I spent the last 5 years in Pennsylvania, where honestly I did most of the most recent advocacy work for MDF, and the process has really been simplified. Even though he makes it look like you're going to be in charge of coordinating this and doing that, it's really very simple. You just need to identify who are your senators, and the letters, the templates for the letters are provided. You just need to make sure that you add your personal story to the letters. In my case, my daughter, Emily, was diagnosed with congenital myotonic dystrophy. And, I usually focus my message in that, around her medical journey. And I also happen to be a physician, a sleep disorder specialist, so I see these patients in the clinic. So that's important too for your representatives. If you have centers in your state that have research labs that work on this condition, or if you actually are involved in taking care of these patients, that kind of adds to how important this disease may be for your state or your community in particular. And then communicating with them has been made very easy through this page that we have at the Myotonic Dystrophy Foundation website. And then I do recruit people around me to send letters, because you don't have to be affected or be a caregiver. For anyone in the state can communicate with their representatives or their senators and raise awareness. So, for example, for that campaign that we have going on, I did send an email to many of my friends and told them, hey, would you please just add your name and address and contact your representative to unfreeze the funding for NIH. So it's very easy to do. Most of these offices will respond very quickly. You'll get a response. Sometimes the initial response is just, we received your letter, we'll get back to you. And then, as Kevin said, you follow up. You send them another email. And usually it's very easy to coordinate the meetings, and they provide enough time for you to tell your story and plant that seed for support. Senator Casey, he's no longer in office in Pennsylvania, but we were able to get him to support the PDMRP initiative for the last 3 years. So that makes me very proud. So just get involved. It's very easy. We'll help you. You won't be alone.
Belinda, I'm sorry, you finished? We couldn't tell if your screen was frozen. My apologies. Okay. Martha, let me turn it over to you to share a bit of your story about your wonderful work in California that really led us to our first eligibility in PRMRP, and some of the other relationships that you've developed in the delegation and how you've really mobilized not just folks in California, but throughout the country.
Okay, happy to do it. It's I can't, I need somebody, it says the host needs to unfreeze my video. So I don't know if that's you or somebody. Okay, now we can start my video. Okay, hello everybody. So as Kevin said, my name is Martha Montag Brown. Like all of you, our family has the story of how we learned about and got deeply involved with the Myotonic Dystrophy Foundation. But our son was diagnosed 8 years ago with adult onset and has had very serious impacts as a result. And then we learned four others in our family also had myotonic dystrophy. And I'm sure, like many of you, we were just in a state of shock. He was, a young man and had lived a very active life, including being a collegiate athlete. So after we sort of absorbed what happened, I called MDF and said, what can our family do? Because we won't survive unless we try and do something. So at that moment in time, I was told by the then leadership of the organization that they had been trying for some time to get access to the PRMRP that Kevin just had told you about. And it's something where there are many, many diseases, if you will, that appear on a list. This is a unique funding program. It has nothing to do with whoever happens to be president. It's actually directed by Congress, and the senators make the decision. And Kevin, you correct me if I'm saying anything wrong. So it's a unique program, and the senators themselves make this decision. So our family, when we were told if we could find a way to make a contact with then Senator Dianne Feinstein and see if she would be our advocate for myotonic dystrophy to be included on the list of diseases that would be eligible to be funded. Unlike the other program Kevin described, where we're asking for a certain amount of money, a line item of $10 million, the PRMRP program is one that you could get $500,000 one year, you could get $15 million another. It really depends on the applications, and some diseases don't get anything. We have gotten $24 million in 8 years, so that's a testament to our research community. So how did we do that? I just picked up the phone and called Dianne Feinstein's office and said, I'd like to talk to somebody on her health team and the defense team, at which Kevin recommended, since this is funded through the Department of Defense. And, had to make several phone calls, got a call back, and I said, I'm a constituent. I'm a mom whose child has just been diagnosed with a disease for which there's no cure or treatment. And we need more federal funding, and Senator Feinstein could be the key to that for our community of people living with this disease. And it would be a very long story to tell you every bit of it. But I think what was most important is I found a wonderful staff person who agreed to meet with me. I go to Washington periodically on business, so I set a time to meet with him. And, initially he said, well, you don't have to come in. And I said, no, I'm coming in. And he said, well, we'll see if it's going to work. And I said, well, I'll just hang out until it works for you. So I was, like all moms and dads when it concerned your kids, a dog with a bone. So we had an in-person meeting, and I told them our story and why it was so critical, how this disease impacts people's daily lives. And by the end of that meeting, the staff, the DOD and health staff, agreed to help us convince Senator Feinstein to be the person to go and say, we need myotonic dystrophy to be added to the list of approved diseases that can get funding. So we drafted a letter that she could use. It was about a 3-page letter, and that took a while to get all the data and information that her staff could use about, how it impacted the state of California and the people and the doctors that practiced medicine. And we had a whole story, and I still have that letter, and I'd be happy to share it with anybody. And kept in very close touch with her staff. And they told me that, unlike some senators, that Dianne Feinstein responded to phone calls. A lot of senators prefer email or whatever, but her staff said to me, if you have your network call, that will get on her radar screen, because every day she wanted to know how many phone calls she got on whatever topic of the day. So we set up a week, and we had hundreds of people call that week. We had sent out a script. A lot of people were friends and family and coworkers, and then other people in the myotonic dystrophy community. And so by the end of that particular week, because we were told that if we asked everybody to call, between whatever it was, August 1st and 5th, that it would really get noticed versus, call anytime you have time. And by the end of the week, I heard back from her staff saying that by day 3, she said, what is myotonic dystrophy and why is everybody calling about it? And that led to a conversation, which ultimately led to her being our advocate. And we were able to get myotonic dystrophy on the list of approved diseases. And so it was a very, we couldn't have been more grateful for her support. Kevin and I were able to present her with an award the next year for that, and to really, and we stayed in touch with her staff. So there's a lot more I can say, but I'm going to pause there and thank you so much.
Martha, I think your story is just such a great illustration of the power of grassroots advocacy. Being tenacious, being polite, but being persistent and elevating an issue that otherwise wouldn't get elevated without the leadership that you showed and the group of, concerned voices that you raised, and it really makes a difference. So, I think one of the things to highlight is that I know in this day and age, it's easy to get a little cynical or to think that your voice doesn't matter or your vote doesn't matter. It really does. I think as we think about campaigns as the year goes on, in addition to the work we're doing as far as trying to get people to support it, there's going to be opportunities to recognize and thank people, as Martha was saying. We do at the end of each year a bipartisan award. So this year the award went to Congresswoman Kiggins and Congressman Moskowitz to thank them. Some of you may aspire to develop the kind of relationship with Senator, like Martha did with Senator Feinstein, that leads to, us bestowing our award on, that particular member of Congress. So you might find that, over the summer, there's a town hall meeting or other opportunities you've got to thank, the member of Congress that you were successful in having sign our letters of support. I think one thing to think about too is your voice does stand out in those forums, because they're, truthfully hearing a lot of people talk about, maybe they care about the gun issue, or maybe they care about, abortion or reproductive rights, or, whatever side of that issue, but they hear it all the time. And they're kind of, you're not going to go to those meetings and change a member's mind who's kind of invested in that one position. But if they hear somebody who says, I just want to talk to you for a second about my story with myotonic dystrophy, they will really welcome that conversation, because it's an opportunity to have a dialogue with somebody versus having, people kind of yelling back and forth about, an issue that is going to be settled in the mind of the person that's there. So I think there's really great opportunities to do what, all of the really cool things that Martha has been sharing and mentoring people on. So we're grateful for that. So let me go to Lisa, who's going to close out our presentations from our volunteer leaders. And she's going to share a little bit of her story, which is also inspiring and unique. And Lisa, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Kevin. Appreciate it. I learned about myotonic dystrophy in 2005 when my daughter Kayla was born. I had had multiple miscarriages and didn't know why. They didn't have any reason. So they just said, be careful in your next pregnancy, don't be stressed out. And so anyway, Kayla was born in July of 2005 at 32 weeks, not breathing, not moving, ventilated trach, by 2 months old. And we took her home on a ventilator at 105 days old. And, we ended up weaning her off. We worked really hard, diligently. And, she made me realize that even though I was a software product manager for eBay, I realized that advocacy was in my genes. Both of my parents worked on Capitol Hill for 21 years, advocating. My mom advocated for disabilities. She worked on some of the American Disabilities Act and other things. And I just kind of realized, I was able to do it. And so we ended up starting the foundation with 8 families. We got together, created a board, and then ended up running the Myotonic Dystrophy Foundation until 2012. So I, got involved that way. I took some time to, be with Kayla and try and work on some of the educational issues she was going through. So most of you probably, may know my story because of the Kayla Vidic Award every year. But, I grew up in DC around advocacy, but I didn't really participate in the way I do now, which has been really exciting. This year, we had a trip to Florida, which we do every year for 2 weeks around Thanksgiving. And my family on the East Coast gets together there. And so Milton and Helene, the hurricanes, knocked us out of our vacation. So we said, well, my brother lives in Harpers Ferry, West Virginia. Let's go there and be with them there. And so we planned our trip. My husband had never seen DC, so we ended up going to tour around DC. But then I called Tanya and Kevin and I said, I'd like to advocate on Capitol Hill while I'm there. And so I met with both of them. They gave me some great ideas. Kevin gave me a list of people that might be the most appropriate to talk to, which was really helpful. To kind of know where to start sometimes. I mean, obviously, you want to start as a constituent in your own, space for, Congress or your representatives. And so I did. I met with quite a few people on that trip. And so I met with Israel Garcia, who's the healthcare aide for Representative Pete Aguilar's office. He's the ranking chairman of the Appropriations Committee. And head of the Democratic caucus. Went there to the Cannon House building. That was my first meeting. I was a little nervous, I have to say. But Kevin came in with me. I told my story and they pulled out the tissues. They were very engaged and ended up realizing that, oh, wow, this is something we really need to listen. And then Kevin helped to fill in some of the details about the peer-reviewed medical research program. And so we asked for support. The next meeting we did 5 meetings total. And then I met with 2 people here at home. So we met with Sean Murray from Senator Tim Kaine's office. Tim Kaine was one of our board members when I was running the foundation early in the years. We met with John Chambliss, who's the healthcare legislator for Senator Alex Padilla, which was very exciting. I met with Caitlin Kelly, who was Adam Schiff's healthcare legislator. Just as we walked in his office, Adam Schiff walked by me, and I was in awe. And then I heard on the news behind me on CNN, Santa Cruz has a tsunami coming. And I was like, wait, what? That's where we live. So it was one of those moments. But it took a bit for them to come out, and Caitlin sat with us and listened to our story and was able to, help us. And some of these people already are on our support letters. So sometimes I just went there to thank people. And then sometimes I went to ask for support. But I think it's really important to share your story. You'll be amazed at how interested they are in how you got there and why you're interested in this disease. I was able to share that I was an athlete in college and never thought in a million years that myotonic dystrophy would hit our family. I had gone to business school. I had all of these things going in my life, and I only learned about this because of my daughter's birth. And then, of course, I was diagnosed after that, and my mother was diagnosed. So, it's such an important thing to be able to walk in and just share a little bit with them. The personal side of it is what really stops them and makes them listen. So don't be scared to share details that might be hard, because I feel like this disease is hard, as we know, every body system, it's so incredibly challenging. And we do it because we love our family and we raise our kids, to be super people, just like we would if they didn't have this disability. And they need to hear that, we're just regular people that unfortunately were, diagnosed with a very challenging disorder. But what we do is we take care of our family. We do a great job. And I had 6 pregnancies and I had 1 live birth. So, it's a tough disorder. I wanted 5 kids, I wanted a full basketball team, actually. So, I think it's really important to share your story. One thing happened when I was there. I wasn't able to get with some of the senators or get time from the healthcare aides. So I asked if I could do a Zoom call when I got home. And so after that, I was able to meet with Seamus McKeon, who's Representative Jimmy Panetta's healthcare aide. He's fantastic. It was so easy to talk to. And so we did a Zoom call and I shared my story and, ask again for, the important thing is, what is the ask? And you're asking for this, that was fiscal year 25, the peer-reviewed medical research program under the congressionally directed medical research program. I had to actually write that down a few times to make sure I remembered what to say. And, but it's such an important program, and it's so important for all of us to get to treatments. And with each of us involving our families and our friends and other people, you're going to make a difference, and you're going to help us all push this disease closer to treatments. So I think it's really incredibly important. When I got home, I also decided Jimmy Panetta is I'm a constituent of his. And so Representative Panetta was in Santa Cruz. And so I asked if I could meet with him. So my husband and I went there and we sat and we talked to him. And again, he was so compelled by the story. We also asked him if he would support the DM Rare Disease Day. And he said, absolutely. So he is going to do a proclamation for California to support the Myotonic Dystrophy Rare Disease Day on September 15th, 2025. So there are little things that you can do that make a huge difference. And I want to encourage all of you, if you want to call and talk to me, my phone is always open. My email is always open. I will walk you through what I did. It can be a little daunting, but once you do it, I was so fired up after the first meeting that I just felt like I could do anything. And so I walked into all the other meetings and I feel like I made a difference. And so I'm very excited to join the National Advocacy Committee and to help push everything forward for this foundation. It's so incredibly important. And that's my story.
Thank you so much, Lisa. That was wonderful. So Tanya was going to gather up all of the comments that we have, and we'll start our Q&A.
Great. I don't know if maybe Belen and Lisa and Martha want to come back on just so that we can address or they can answer any of these other questions that people might have. So the first question is it as powerful to send an email as it is to call? One of your representatives or senators, I'm assuming.
I think so. I usually have only sent emails, and as I said, they respond usually pretty quickly. Even if not with an answer to what you wrote about, at least they let you know they receive it and they will get back to you. And they usually do. So yes, I don't think there's a need to call anybody.
Yeah,
I don't know if Martha's experience is different.
Sorry. I think it's up to you as to what you're most comfortable with, whether it's making a phone call or sending an email. The advantage to email, though, is that we can track that. We can see, what sort of response rate we're getting from these action alerts, and then we can know if, a certain office is getting a high number of emails. One of the things I can do on behalf of the foundation, since I'm based here in DC, is I can follow up, with some of these offices. So if you make a phone call, you can certainly let us know that, but it's harder for us to know that that actually happened. And so it's really nice to know that through have a written, record of that. But if folks, feel more comfortable with phone calls, or as Martha said, you run into an office that says, look, we respond better to phone calls versus emails, it's fine. I think it's really important to just share that personal story. I think the other thing with phone calls that are a little tricky is, you in a congressional office, it sort of depends, but in a House office, you might have one person who's answering the phones. In a Senate office, you might have maybe 2 or 3 people answering phones. They oftentimes don't have a lot of time to take that call. They're going to just say, what is it that you want? And you're going to say, well, I want you to sign on to the CDMRP letter. I'm with the Myotonic Dystrophy Foundation. They'll get your name and your address. And then that, the call might be kind of short. Whereas an email gives you an opportunity to share a little bit more of your story, in that longer format, and then you'll get, a written response to that. But it's just, again, I wouldn't discourage anybody from making phone calls. If that's what they're most comfortable with, go for it. And let us know that you made the call in some fashion.
So oh, sorry,
Martha?
Martha, go for it.
Oh, I was just going to mention, sometimes this would probably be more pertain to senators than congressmen, but I also ended up getting to know her California staff senator when we were working with Senator Feinstein, and I ended up meeting people in the LA office. And I just feel like that was a very, as Lisa said, we want to be clear about our ask. I mean, that was a really big ask. And I just thought the more people I knew and the more people that knew me and the more personal it was, in this case, we'd have a better result. But with senators, they all have local staff depending on where you're located in your state. And so I did make a point of getting to know those people as well. And again, I started with a phone call, followed up with an email, and ended up meeting them in person as well.
A great point. Thanks, Martha.
One of the follow-up questions to the issue of, or the question as to whether or not emails or visits or phone calls are better, but what are the next steps? Folks are interested in knowing, how do we know when or how to send letters or to pick up the phone? And, what's next? Is there something right now that folks can do, or how do we move forward?
I'm happy to start. So I think right now, if you haven't already gone to the website to send a letter to your senators and representatives about the NIH research pause, I think that would be the first place to start. So go to myotonic.org, go to the Action Center, find that letter, please personalize it and send that to your 2 senators and representatives, because right now there's a lot of confusion and not a lot of clarity around what NIH is able to do and not do. And so we're still seeing, and it's not just, we're one voice of many. There's lots of things happening right now. I know the Muscular Dystrophy Association, we've been in touch with the Every Life Foundation, the National Organization of Rare Diseases. We've been talking to some of the groups that represent the academic medical centers. I mean, there's a lot of folks and a lot of things happening. So I think if we can continue to be a voice among many on this, it's really important, because we're at a point now where that all needs to be resolved. So in about a couple of weeks, you're going to see communications from us to the community that has more clarity around when we're going to start this, campaign for CDMRP and PRMRP. Not to get too into the weeds, but Congress has a deadline of March 12th in order to kind of finalize the current budget year that we're in. So we think that there'll be clarity around that soon, and we can start to give you guys more direction around when emails need to go out for these campaigns and when we're going to be asking you sort of, we'll probably define a 2-week period where we'll want folks to try to request those meetings. So I think plan on March, April as being that window where we're going to be doing a lot of activity, and those emails are going to be going out, and you're going to get a note saying, hey, there's a new draft email that's up on the website. Encourage you to send folks there. This is the window of time in that, as I said, March to April time period. And then also this is going to be the time period where we really need everybody to be requesting those meetings. So you're going to be getting all of that from us. And I'm always available to talk to folks who, after this call want to be captains, but maybe have other questions they didn't want to ask in the chat. And then, help bring some more clarity around this, but hopefully that's helpful. I know it's still a little vague. Some of it is because we're in the start of a new administration, and there's a hangover for this budget. So it's not as clear as we'd like it to be, but we'll do our best to make it as clear as we can to the community.
Thank you, Kevin. That was another one of the questions, is if we're finding Washington to be more difficult during the transition into this new administration, will research funding be affected besides the freeze? Is there anything else? Will the Department of Defense funding be protected? Martha mentioned that it's done a little differently, that research is provided, the funding dollars are provided differently than through the budget in the same way as the NIH funding. So how and what do we know? And is it more difficult, or what do we think about what will happen in the future?
That is an excellent question. I was actually up on Capitol Hill today and met with a number of staffers, and so learned some things. So I think that it to the point of being difficult, yes, there is many members of Congress are in a cost-cutting mood. They're thinking about programs that need to be reduced. And there's a variety of reasons that I won't get into for that. So it is more challenging in that way, which is why it's more important than ever that we communicate the urgency that we have around this, right? So we need to be there, making our case. But it is challenging. But the only way we're going to change that tide and benefit our community is by telling our stories. And you might have some offices that are like, well, I don't know if we're going to do that. We're going to be cutting things. I mean, I heard today, and this doesn't pertain to DOD. I'm going to get to that the Department of Defense. I'll get to that in a second. But the Republicans in the House are contemplating a double-digit cut to the National Institutes of Health budget for the upcoming fiscal year. So that would be billions of dollars in reductions. And I think our, other patient advocacy organizations need to speak in a unified voice that this is counter to, what I said, Tanya said earlier, which is we're about increasing funding for research and eliminating barriers. So I think we're going to have to really speak loudly. We're going to have as many people in our community as ever making that message. The Department of Defense budget, the research program within it, PRMRP, CDMRP, is unique. It's something that was started through advocacy by the breast cancer community back in the 90s. Periodically, members of Congress will say, hey, why is this funding in the Department of Defense? Shouldn't we get rid of it and move it to NIH or some other thing? So that's always a risk. And again, the only way to counter that is by saying, hey, this has been an incredible source of resources for us at a time when NIH funding for us has been flat for a decade. And so I think, again, it's that personal story that will hopefully turn the tide, and know that we're not alone in this. We're not the only group that's going to be advocating for that. There are about 60 diseases annually that are included in the PRMRP program eligibility, and all of them hopefully will be speaking with a clear voice. But it is a hard environment. I think we're in a good position, though, to be successful if, all of us are speaking with one unified voice. I hope I answered that. Martha?
Given that Rare Disease Day, I think it's still February 28th, is coming up. Is there a way to, again, band together with other rare disease organizations and walk the halls of Capitol Hill and just, whether it's a flyer that has, pictures of 3 people with myotonic dystrophy and leaving on somebody's desk saying, these are the lives that would be impacted by any budget cut, let alone a double-digit cut, or, using an example of 2 or 3 current programs that are being funded through NIH that if they're cut, could be, really just devastating. But I'm just wondering, to take this moment in time before it's too late and try and really make a strong statement.
Martha, that's a great idea. So in the past, we've done a webinar around Rare Disease Day, and I think this year we were going to mix it up a little bit, and we're planning to have an action alert that'll go out. And I'm glad you mentioned Rare Disease Day so we can mention this because I didn't do it earlier. We will have an action alert going out. We haven't quite landed on the message because everything right now is obviously so fluid. But I think we're leaning towards having a message like you're suggesting, sort of a general message, particularly having heard from some offices today about this cut that they're anticipating, that we want to have maybe a universal NIH research message of saying, look, no, like this is important. We need to increase NIH funding, not cut it. And then highlighting, areas where we're seeing opportunity. And we've partnered very closely with the leadership of the Scientific Advisory Committee, which is composed of DM researchers at really important institutions all across the country. You've worked with some of the folks at Stanford, but they're VCU, it's Rochester, it's Baylor, it's the University of Florida. And we want to highlight that important research and how it's, leading us down a path towards our first ever FDA, approved treatments.
So thank you. This is fantastic. One question has come in. You mentioned earlier International Myotonic Dystrophy Awareness Day, September 15th. And early on, you talked about a proclamation and, how you do that on the more local or state level. We definitely have folks who are in attendance right now who have made that happen. Can you talk about that a little bit? Because it's different than the Senate resolution that we were able to secure a couple of years ago. How can folks actually go out and get a proclamation like Lisa was referring to also for California? And what difference does that make?
I was looking at the list of attendees to tonight's webinar, and I recognize some folks there who have had success in getting proclamations, which is why I smiled, because I'm so happy to see that. I should have shared a copy in advance. So we have a standard template or just copy of what a resolution can look like. And, you can plug in, your hometown or your state, like it's got, room for that. But it has, it'll say something along the lines of whereas, myotonic dystrophy is a serious rare genetic disorder, whereas it affects, X number of people, in the United States and internationally. And it lists all those facts. And then at the very end, it says, the city of, Washington, D.C., proclaims September 15th, International Myotonic Dystrophy Awareness Day. So it's just a series of bullets, information that's just facts about the disease. And then the last part is a very nice, on this day we declare and celebrate, this day. So we'll get you guys a copy of it after this. And all you have to do is call up your mayor, call up the governor's office and say, hey, it's Kevin Brennan. Again, similar to the script we gave you for the Hill thing outreach, calling up about a proclamation. Who would I talk to in the mayor's office? Who would I talk to in the governor's office? And you won't be the first call they've received asking that question. And they should have a path and say, oh, it's Mike Smith. It's Sally Jennings. I'll patch you through to them, or I'll have them call you back. Or here's their email address. This is a pretty, well-oiled process on the part of these folks because they want to do this. These are easy things to do. If you're asking for $100 million for something, those are harder conversations. When it's the matter of printing out a proclamation and giving it to you, they like to try to do things that make people happy that don't cost any money. But I think it's a huge awareness opportunity, right? So you can get a photograph with the governor or the mayor, post that on social media, post that in your local paper. I'm not the media expert, but there's some basic things that you can do that really helps get this out. Talk to some of your local big employers or others. I know others have talked to their city councils and others about lighting up a building, in green for Myotonic Dystrophy Awareness Day. So there's no shortage of things on the website that you can see to help promote that. But getting into your elected officials and just asking them to do the proclamation should be a pretty straightforward and easy conversation.
Thank you, Kevin. I want to just remind folks that any questions that don't get answered, you're welcome to reach out. Send us an email at info@myotonic.org. That's info, info @myotonic.org, and we'll be able to follow up if we don't get to your questions. I recognize that we're after 5 o'clock Pacific right now, but there are a couple of additional questions, and I want to make sure we answer these, especially because folks are interested in the advocacy captain position. I'm wondering, how much time is that per month? Is there one for Mississippi? Is there one for North Carolina? What can we share with them, and how do they get involved?
Excellent. So glad to hear that. So we need folks in North Carolina and we need folks in Mississippi. So those are 2 vacant positions. So would welcome hearing from you if you're interested, and you can send it to the mailbox that Tanya just mentioned, and we'll reach out to you and we can have a one-on-one conversation to get into more of the details. This is kind of a front-loaded position. A lot of the effort that goes into this is going to be in the spring. So that window that I talked about of, okay, when do we send emails? When do we do those meetings? So in the March, April timeframe, how much time would you need, think about it this way, to reach out to your friends to get them to send an email? It's as little or as much as that. It's hard to quantify some of that, but that's the task at hand, if you will. And then, setting up those meetings with your 2 Senate offices and your House offices shouldn't take too long. We're going to give you the materials so that you have the script or, the written material so you can send the email. So it's a matter of, sending that note, maybe having a couple of follow-up exchanges with the office to get it scheduled, and then having that conversation. Maybe there's a conversation with me, beforehand if you need to prep. And then those meetings take, about 20 minutes, maybe 30. And then there's, the follow-up email saying, thank you for the meeting. There's the follow-up email for 2 weeks later saying, hey, I just want to check in. Did you guys make a decision on our request to sign that letter? And then, maybe there's some follow-up conversations with me about, well, they wouldn't do it or they will do it. And then thinking about ways that you can then, highlight the folks that have done what we were hoping they would do. And then that piece kind of happens throughout the year. How can you continue to raise awareness? How can you recognize, the folks that did what we asked them to do? And I think that, that again, I hope is a very fun activity. I think one of the things that I always highlight is that going into some of these conversations with Hill folks, I get it. It's a little scary and intimidating first. I worked on the Hill for one stretch, 8 years, and then was the lobbyist for the Arthritis Foundation. And even though I had done thousands of meetings on one side of the table, when I became a seller of ideas and not the buyer of ideas, I was terrified. I mean, it was really hard. But after that first meeting, you walk out of there and you're like, wow, I did that. That was amazing. And you just feel this sense of empowerment. And I can see Lisa and Martha and Belen nodding. It's just, it happens. And so I think that you'll find like, I want to do more. But I think, I think it's a manageable amount of time. I know we're all very, very busy. I was saying in the beginning, I can hear my kids downstairs who are cheering because we're going to have a snow day in DC. So I know that we all have, caregiving to deal with and, making dinner and all of those things. And we're actually, adding to add in. But I hope and think that this is something that will fit within your busy lives.
And Kevin, if folks would like to talk with you to just hopefully get some additional guidance or personalize their outreach, is that okay for them to? Okay.
Absolutely. I love it. Love it.
Wonderful. Okay.
Because those folks are going to be the people that are on next year's webinar and sharing their stories. So, Martha, Belen, and Lisa are going to hand the baton to those folks. So we're hoping that you guys will be the ones then to recruit even more people.
And if there's anyone who's interested in hearing more about any of the personal stories that were shared by the members of our National Advocacy Committee, is it okay to connect them with you as well? Yes.
Of course.
Okay.
Yes.
Fantastic. So
Yes.
so please please then do reach out to info@myotonic.org if you have additional questions, you want to follow up with anyone from anyone you've heard here. We appreciate you being with us today. We're excited about what we are going to be able to accomplish this next year with $10 million. We are confident we are going to get that $10 million from CDMRP, but we're going to need everybody's help. And we want to make sure that we have for the 9th year the PRMRP funding that is secured for our scientists working on myotonic dystrophy, because every day we are getting closer to treatments and a cure for our disease. So thank you, everybody, for being with us this afternoon, and we look forward to talking with you again very soon. Take good care.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
night.